I'm Cade Paradoxa, and I'm doing a video review of Kim Dallesandro's novel titled Oklahoma. And it's this one right here. Um, Last week I did a video review of her novel Dream Maker, this one right here. And these are all these are novels that just some of the novels that she's published in the past 3.5 years or so. These are all novels by her. Anyway, I just finished reading Oklahoma a few hours ago, and this one's really a straightforward, I would say, somewhat, compared to Dream Maker, which was much more fragmented in its narrative structure, much more psychological with the dealing with perception and things along those lines. This one is much more. It's certainly got a complicated narrative for sure, but it's much more straightforward in how the various people are the way that they their roles play out in the story. At the same time, though, it's very it's definitely a drama about interpersonal relations and questions of who you can trust. It's definitely a factor, and it's also, I don't know, it's dealing with what people's motivations are in the story. Actually, I also should mention this novel this has a screenplay written for it by I believe Kim Dallesandro co-wrote the screenplay actually with another writer, and it's actually it's been submitted to the Screenwriters Guild in Hollywood. So this might actually become a movie at some point if they greenlight it. If it gets greenlit, maybe there can be social media buzz about it, and maybe that'll help greenlight the production of a movie about it. Anyway, I think it's really a fascinating cat and mouse type of storyline, really, about the main characters of Muriel and Steve, they're a married couple who own a cattle ranch together, and her sister Martha lives with them, and Martha's relationship with Steve is a very complicated one, and also the story has a character named Brian, who is a teenager who was living in a boys' home and was in juvenile hall before, and Steve is now his guardian, and there's a bit of a mystery about how Brian got in trouble to be in juvenile hall and then the boys' home and all of that. He doesn't want to talk about it, and so Steve kind of pries him about it, and in hopes of figuring out the details of that. And this, as the story goes along, you kind of you get to know these characters more and more. And there's also another character named John in the story who Muriel meets, and John is quite something of a character, because and in some ways he could probably be seen as the villain in the story in some ways, although his character gets more complicated later in the book. So it's each character has their own nuances, and there's no true heroes in it, and there's no true villains in it. It's just definitely a story of complicated people dealing with each other's personality flaws, and their some of them with their egos, and others with their whatever their social deficiency might be. Um, but Muriel, the story really unfolds as Muriel goes missing from the cattle ranch. Um, Her and Steve had a fight before, like they had a bad argument, and like basically she ran off, and Steve is determined to find her, but he already knows where she is. He believes because they've as he describes in the story, he's gone through this several times before. He knows exactly where she is, even if she like he knows that she's in Tulsa, up north, and in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and so he's determined to go out on the road up to Tulsa, which is a several hours drive, and he's determined to go find her, and he has to take Brian along since he's his guardian. So he takes Brian along with him under the pretenses of Brian meeting his mom, his mother, and like Brian, who won't even talk about why he went to juvenile hall and the boys' home before. He's hesitant about the whole situation because he doesn't want to break any of the rules, and he knows it's against the rules for him to go back to talk to his mother or see her again. So he says, even though he's under pressure by from Brian to go along with him, and he has to kind of follow. He has to kind of obey what Brian says. Like Brian has to obey what Steve says. So sorry, I might be getting their names mixed up right now. But anyway, the story unfolds in such a way that they really get to know each other on the road while they're on their journey up from the cattle ranch to Tulsa to go find Muriel, who Steve knows well enough that she's probably out drinking at one of the bars in Tulsa, so they're going up to find her, and he's having conversations with Muriel's sister Martha on the phone, trying to find out, where Muriel is, where specifically she's at. And then the narrative in the story is interesting because it switches over to Muriel, who she's like blackout drunk in Tulsa, having a manic episode now, like and just not even sure where she is, and she knows that she's angry at Steve, but she doesn't really have a clear sense of where she is or how she got there or why, and she woke up with John, I was already describing John, like John's character was a complicated mess, and so she's got it. And not only did she run away from Steve, she now has to run away from John. She's just trying to get away from him. So while she doesn't know where she is, she doesn't even know where her car is. She doesn't know where her car is. She doesn't know where the hotel that she booked is at. She doesn't know where it is. She forgets where it was or which one it was. So she's like she's on the run from more than one person essentially. So dealing with all of that, there's also a character. Or what do I think? There's also a setting in a casino. I think it's north of Tulsa in the story. The casino is a whole part of the plot line as well, dealing with the characters. So I think a lot of the story is really it's a novel that talks about addiction really, mental illness and addiction are central points in the story, and really like dealing with Martha's addiction to alcohol is a big factor, but also there's the element of kind of discourse about gambling addiction. I mean, at the casino, dealing with not just specifically about not specifically about Muriel, even just like everybody in the casino and their addiction lifestyle. There, like everybody's addiction lifestyles at that casino. You can you really experience it in the way it's written. It's like dealing with all of those factors. It's a very interesting read for dealing with like I really like experiencing the tumultuous elements of all of it, you know. The cat and mouse chase between Steve and Muriel, and also just like the whole like the topsy-turvy element of, you know, her coming down from her manic episode while she's at the she ultimately ends up at the casino, you know, spending money that you know, she shouldn't have. You know, and that's a whole part of the storyline. I'm not sure if I should mention how that part of the story unfolds. If I don't know if it's spoiling the story or not, but she ends up with a lot of money that she shouldn't have. So that's a whole factor involved, and why people are after her for that. So, or like, you know, there's things involved about that. And you know, it unfolds in such a strange way with all of that. And also there's elements of there's an aspect of the story about how Steve and Muriel met, which is about you know, it's very messed up. Like they describe their very first date as the day that they met, which was how their cars ran into each other, their vehicles collided on the road. And there's two different stories about how that, you know, and two different ways of pondering how that actually occurred. You know, like was that an accident or on purpose? You know, so all of that, you know, very interesting unfolding on that about like you know, and you know, just like the chaotic nature of people's lives and their motivations, and you know, keeping secrets from one another and that kind of thing. That's a big part of the characters in the storyline. It's a story a lot about, it's about addiction, and it's a story about you know, people keeping their secrets and not being honest and not being good at communicating, you know, like bad communications, and learning to deal with each other's flaws, you know, really. And just like, but the story really is like the drama really circles around how they're going to deal with each other as they witness each other's instabilities and whatnot, like all of those factors. But anyway, it's just a really good read, and I definitely recommend it to anybody who like it really likes, you know, page turners that are you know, about the the messed up lives that people lead, and dealing with you know, their own insecurities and their emotions, and you know, their dysfunctional relationships, you know. So I also wanted to read the back of this. It says, Oklahoma is slow and pastoral, where its predecessor, a dead-end cul-de-sac, was frenetic, yet it packs maybe even more of a punch due to its slow burn. The reader feels invested in all the characters, every one of whom is flawed, but every one of whom is human and sympathetic. From the first chapter, we realize we have walked in on the last chapter of a tragedy in the classical sense, where each character's personal history meshes with the others in a way that seems predestined to lead inexorably to disaster. And yet, is it inevitable? The reader will be hanging on to the end to find out. There's also these quotes by readers that I'll read it here. It says, Kim Dallesandro writes of an enviable prowess that cannot be taught, says Dyer McCain, author of A Scar is Born. Kim shows expertise at reeling the reader in and not letting you go until she's had her way with you, and you love every delicious minute of it. That was by Lisa Cherry, author of The Hard Way. This is a book of lyrical and dreamlike prose with a stunning and heartbreaking end. As four people hoped for absolution and with love and compassion struggle for the acceptance of pain and loss and its permanence in a life of impermanence, says Kathy Doyle. So I really like this book, and I recommend it to everybody who likes a good drama story. I did want to read the dedicated to page, or show it here. It says to Jake at State Farm. It's kind of like a bit of an inside joke about the storyline. But anyway, I believe Kim Dallesandro co-wrote the actual screenplay for this, for the what might be the movie if they make it for this. So they have it written and ready to film if they get it greenlit for production. So here's to hoping they go through with it and have a movie for this. It's a really good book. I definitely recommend you read it. If those who've read Dreammaker, if they'd like to, if they're curious about Oklahoma, they're different stories for sure, and the styles are a bit different, but they're actually they both have something in common with the complexity of interpersonal relations. I think has a little bit to do with both books. So it's really, I mean, they're really good books. So I recommend you guys read this one.